Hello, everyone. It's Donna Cravotta, and we are back for the first interview of 2024. And we have Diann Wingert with us today. And I'm just going to give you a quick little intro, and then we're going to get into it because Diann's fun.
I've been warned.
So, yeah, she became a business strategist, coach, and mentor after a 20-year career as a no BS psychotherapist. Her mission is to help women with big ideas, busy brains get focused, fired up, and flame retardant. Diann is an expert on women who are twice as exceptional as she is, ADHD and gifted, and encourages women to embrace standing out instead of fitting in, and embraces the opportunity in aging to grow bolder, not older. I love that. And she's the creator of the Boss Up Breakthrough, host of the Driven Women Entrepreneur podcast, and she's frequently referred to as the speaker of uncomfortable truths. And we're gonna dip our toe into that water. So welcome,
Actually, we're
Diann.
jumping in the deep end.
Okay, let's just go. Welcome, 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 and I can't wait to dive into the deep end.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and Happy New Year to you and to everyone present and watching the replay. I think 2024 is going to be an interesting year.
I agree. I agree. And if you are watching the replay, tag us in the comments and we will come back and we will respond. So we want to keep this conversation going. It doesn't end when our 30 minutes are up. So let's dive in. You want me to
Woohoo!
start or should,
Yeah,
or you? Okay. So I'm just going to start with what happened when you turned 50, and then we're going to take it from there.
I think it's probably more like what didn't happen when I turned 50. I got my midlife crisis out of the way at 40, I thought. But once I
Mm.
turned 50, I realized the party was really just getting started. We will no doubt talk about the effects of menopause and my unique perspective on it. But I remarried at 50 in a strapless mermaid dress, and I looked pretty fab at the time. I had been a
Mhm.
single parent for many years and raised my 3 kids to adulthood. I embraced Buddhism after having been an evangelical Christian in the past. I have gone skydiving. I got a couple of tattoos in my 50s. And I really started to realize that for me, 50 was the beginning of the years when I started practicing radical self acceptance and giving myself permission to be and say and do exactly as I wished instead of continuing the decades long habit of waiting for other people to invite me to speak. So, how's that?
Mm. That's great. That's great. And I'm so glad I invited you to speak.
You might get more than you bargained for because, I find that for women over 50, once they really take advantage of the opportunity to what I call stand up, show up, and speak up, even though the culture around us, Donna, tells us it's time for us to shrink and fade, I think some of us felt like we have been holding ourselves back throughout our younger years. And now it's time for us to be seen and heard on our terms instead of waiting for other people to say, "What do you have to say about that, Diann?" I'm going to tell you before you get a chance to ask. So
That's exactly what this is all about because we have so much to share and so much wisdom and so much knowledge and experience, and um, I'm not going to be put in a corner. Sorry.
sorry, not sorry,
Sorry,
because
you took the words out of my mouth.
I often
Okay.
do that. Because historically and across a human history, it is the older women
Yeah.
who have been honored, respected, revered, really valued members of their community. I think it's only been in our modern Western culture that women are seen as a depreciating asset as they age. It's really quite perverse and unlike anything that humans have done over the many, many millennia. So,
I believe that's because we're feared.
and for good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever read the book Cassandra Speaks by Elizabeth Lesser?
No, but it sounds like it should be on my list.
Oh, yeah. Listen to it. Listen to it on Audible.
Hmm.
It's one of the inspirations for this entire project.
One of the things, because I am a former psychotherapist now, business coach, I started seeing a lot of women in their 50s coming into my practice. Some of them, many of them, frankly, wanted to end their long term marriage once the kids had left home. Many of them wanted to move to another country, start a business, adopt a child if they had been childless. And I really started thinking, this is not just me. Like, women over 50 are a force to be reckoned with. And a lot of times it's because of the pent up needs of someone who has put other people's needs, wishes, wants, preferences, and priorities ahead of her own for decades. And we're socially conditioned to do this. And having children obviously requires us to do this. But once your kids are independent, it no longer serves you to continue to be in that
Yeah,
socially conditioned role. And a lot of women decide they're going to break out of their cage and do something totally new. And I applaud it.
I do too. We become untethered, and that's when we find out that there's nothing wrong with us. We're outliers. So let's talk a little bit about the characteristics of an outlier.
Well, because I am a neurodivergent person, I am gifted, I have a specific learning disability, and I have ADHD. I know that I think differently. But let's just take this for an example. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is in the psychiatric manual as a mental health condition. It has deficit and disorder right in the name. But many entrepreneurs have these very same traits and use them to their advantage. So, one
Mhm.
of the ways that I find myself being an outlier is first as a psychotherapist. Many of my peers said, well, people don't ever really outgrow their need for therapy. They just keep developing more insight and self awareness. Okay, but what do they do with it?
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, once you've healed from whatever trauma, abuse, addiction,
Mhm.
neglect, whatever it is, once you're basically healed, I didn't see that continuing to go to therapy indefinitely was benefiting anyone but the therapist. So I started becoming unpopular with my therapy colleagues because I thought once the person is functioning, they should be on their way,
Mhm.
and I don't really think it's a great idea for them to continue. So I sort of evolved out of the role of being a therapist because my thoughts about what therapy was for and how long it should last made me an outlier. Now, as a coach, I'm also an outlier because I have a different perspective on things. I like to work with people who think differently and want to do somewhat disruptive things in the world. And maybe that's partly because of my own history of having to mask and hide and be less than I actually was for other people's comfort and convenience.
Yeah, yeah, I
Sound
agree.
familiar?
Yeah, just a little around the edges. Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't realize I was a creative person until I was in my 50s because there was only room for one creative person in the family, and my brother was a photographer, so Jeff
Mm.
we have creative done. So it was like, "Donna, you do the laundry, and Jeff is a photographer."
Isn't it interesting though, before we go through menopause, we usually willingly accept those socially conditioned roles, the feminine conditioning. It's something that I didn't really understand until I read Luann Brisendine's book, The Female Brain.
Mhm,
And I learned that as long as we're under the influence of estrogen, which is called the tend and befriend hormone for a reason, we not only are focused on other people and what they need from us and want from us and what would benefit them that we can provide because of our conditioning, it's also because of the chemical messengers in
mhm,
our body. Our own hormones predispose us to want to take care of others. So once a woman goes through menopause, I don't find it surprising at all that that's when the divorces happen.
yeah,
Because once she's no longer under the influence of estrogen, I call it the estrogen evacuation, she suddenly starts thinking, frankly, more like a man. Like, well, what's in this for me?
yeah.
Women don't ask themselves those questions until we go through menopause. And then things can get very disruptive if you happen to be straight and married.
Yeah. So one of the things that you talk about is the three reasons that half of all women at midlife are on medication for anxiety and or depression. And what we were just talking about was number two, but let's kind of go through all three of them because I think they kind of go hand in hand and I don't want to leave anything out.
Okay. Well, I think it's actually closer to 40%, but it's
Okay.
still a significant
Okay.
percentage. And there's a few reasons. One of them is the estrogen evacuation. When we go through menopause and our body stops producing estrogen, it changes not only the hormonal composition in our body, it also changes our neurotransmitters. These are the chemical messengers in our brain. Most women, when they're going through perimenopause and menopause, are going to experience some level of anxiety or depression. In fact, a lot of women can get through the hot flashes, the mood swings, and all that. What they cannot deal with is the anxiety that can be crippling, or the depression, which can be equally crippling. So I think there is a legitimate reason for these medications as a transition while we're going through this hormonal disruption called perimenopause and menopause. However, I also think that one of the other reasons is that because women have been culturally and socially conditioned to put other people's needs ahead of their own for decades, this is what we're calling the accumulated toll of decades of feminine conditioning. Once we no longer have the estrogen on board to kind of help us want to keep doing those things for the benefit of others, it can be not only something that we feel anxious and depressed about, women can go into genuine grief
Yeah.
because they realize I have literally spent my entire life doing for others. And now I'm at the what about me time when no one seems to care what I want or need because they're just used to me being here for them.
Hmm.
And that can be, we often talk about a wake-up call. I think of that as a rude awakening because whether you decided to be a stay-at-home mom or like me, you were always a career woman, by the time you realize two-thirds of your life is over and you've never really thought about what you want, what you need, what you prefer, what works for you, what you want to be remembered for, your legacy, it can really feel like a crushing blow, and many women come to the conclusion that it's too late. I, on the other hand, think 50 is the beginning of what could be the most fulfilling, satisfying, productive, and meaningful phase of your entire life.
Oh, 1,000%. And if I didn't fully believe this before, and I did, this project is proof.
Yep.
We've got women all the way up to age 85 reinventing their lives, walking away from careers, doing what they want, changing their partners, going without partners, walking away from toxic relationships, even if it's their family or children. It's, writing books. One woman wrote her first book at 72 years old and her second book at 75. She never expected it was never even on her radar that she would become an author. So, the possibilities are truly endless. And when we give ourselves the permission to be who we were meant to be, one of the things that has come up a lot through these interviews is, and you're the 41st interview that we've done. Um, the phrase that's used is that they remember who they really are.
Mm.
Not even that they found it or uncovered it, they remember. Because we were the conditioning made us forget, made us put aside, like, what we're here to do. And when we could remember that, uh, that's what is empowering.
I can't agree with you more. In fact, it reminds me when I was in college, for my bachelor's degree, I must have been 20 years old. And I've always been a talker. I've always been curious. I've always really enjoyed following my interest and curiosity and doing deep dives into things. I later realized these are very dominant traits for both gifted people and people with ADHD. But at that time, I thought, I want to be a journalist. I want to go into journalism. And I could totally have imagined myself being an investigative reporter. I remember at that time, Sally Jesse Raphael and her red eyeglasses were on TV. And I thought I could do that. So what happened? I'm at UCLA, undergraduate in the communications program. And I'm speaking to my quote unquote guidance counselor, a middle aged man. And I told him, I either want to go into advertising or I want to go into journalism. He promptly talked me out of it, starting with the words, and I'll never forget this. Oh, you don't want to do that. And you know what? Because I didn't have good parenting, because I didn't have a grandparents or anyone who had taken an interest in me and my development, I'm pretty much a self-made person. I assume this person is an adult, a man, a professional, a quote unquote guidance counselor. So even though I think I know what's best for me, he must know better. It wasn't until 40 years later when I launched my podcast, The Driven Woman Entrepreneur, that I actually remembered that I always wanted to be a communicator and I always wanted to have a platform for sharing my views. I can't believe it took me 4 decades to remember that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I hope that one of the things that comes from this is that it spurns that remembrance earlier,
Agreed.
inspires for us to remember who we are and that, the laundry doesn't need to be the central part of who of what makes us up.
Well, I'm gonna share something that I think is an uncomfortable truth, which I like
Mhm.
to talk about a lot.
Okay.
I think that women are more afraid of this one thing than anything else. I mean, of course, we want to be liked, right?
Yeah.
We want to be liked. We want to belong. We want to fit in, and of course, we don't want people thinking that we're old or unattractive or unfeminine. But what I think we're really terrified of, Donna, is people thinking we're selfish.
I had a real problem with that.
Mhm. Because that's part of our conditioning, but how many of us actually refer to ourselves as selfish? Like you're showing on the screen right now, there aren't enough older women who have the guts to tell the truth. Thank you for reminding me. That's the third thing that why so many of us are on antidepressants and
Mhm.
anti-anxiety medications, because
But
we
it's
need more women like you and I and the other women in the Real 50 Over 50 and the Wisdom Revolution, all these amazing interviews that you're doing and the panels. We need to see other women at our age and stage who have the guts to be honest
Mhm.
about how we're being perceived, how we're being treated. We need to be honest about what's going on in our marriages, what's going on in our careers,
Yeah.
what's going on with our bodies, our
Yeah.
friendships, our relationships with our adult children, our relationships with our unfulfilled dreams, wishes, wants, and visions. And if
Mhm.
not enough of us are telling the truth, other women are going to assume that their best days are behind them, that they have nothing to look forward to, that they're washed up, used up, uh, and it's time to go out to pasture. I posted on someone's um, comment on LinkedIn, and I gave my perspective, and a man said, basically paraphrasing, shut up. You and your decades old education are irrelevant, unnecessary, and unwanted.
Mhm.
And I thought, must be doing something right. Let's make some noise.
I love that. I love that. I did that. I was in an AI training and it was like me and like, Mr. Marketing man bun guy, right? And he totally disregarded me until I started asking
Mhm.
questions. And then started like pulling me into the conversation. And it's like, oh, maybe she's not so irrelevant after all. But what you were talking about earlier is about, like, that we need to share these stories, that we need to tell these truths. The visual that I have that drive one of the things that drives me with all of this is that everything is going to move so much faster than it ever had.
Yes.
And people aren't going to have a chance. They're not going to have a chance to remember who they are, or that, there's not going to be a chance to breathe because everything's moving so fast. And I
Mm,
just see them like falling off a cliff. Like, and where the safety net? Where the
mm,
holds them back from falling off the cliff, because we're showing them we lived through these things that, like, it doesn't exist to them anymore. Like, so many of the things that we were raised with, that we grew up with, that we learned through, that were, experiences when we worked, when we went to school, all of these things, they don't exist anymore. So that common bond is this story, and the story of what happens, and the stories that we tell ourselves, and like, how can we shift those stories so they're stories of remembrance of who we are, instead of beating ourselves up for what we're not.
mm. This is so important, and I also think some people say that, "Oh, women over 50, they shouldn't be starting businesses. They shouldn't be coaching people.
Bullshit.
They shouldn't be leading movements because their skills are out of date," and I'm sure you hear this all the time, "They can't keep up with technology."
uh,
And you and I are both up to our eyelashes in technology on the daily, both running businesses over 50. And I think this notion that we can't keep up, while I understand that as we age, some of our functions do get slower, and it does sometimes seem that the world around us is moving faster. I prefer to look at it this way. Yes, of course, I do indulge in FOMO from time to time. And sometimes I think, oh my goodness, this is changing so fast. I don't know if I can keep up. But one thing I do know is with more life experience and more wisdom comes more discernment,
oh, that's the word.
less impulsivity, more of a grounded view on
Yes.
what really matters and what's built to last. So we're going to be focusing on the things that are actually more important and more sustainable, instead of chasing every new trend, which is
Yes.
going to be completely forgotten in a couple of years anyway.
1,000%. I have had, some form of marketing agency for the last 17 years. And, one of my early lessons was I was, first on the scene with social media.
Mm,
So, like, I was teaching people how to do this, and it became really overwhelming fast,
yeah.
because, it changed so quickly. And I had written this whole program. I had 200 people in there, and I couldn't keep up with the changes. And it was very stressful, because this was like, single parent, this is my income, what am I
Yeah.
gonna do? I made a mistake. Um, I didn't understand that you have to continually change, and, um, you know, step up to whatever is needed. Now I get that. But what I did was I dug into the things that weren't going to change. And because I did that years ago, I'm still using that same content,
Mhm.
because it needs to be updated, it needs to be modified, but it still matters, and it's still relevant, because the things that don't change around social media are listening, and relationships, and trust. And that's what I build my work around.
And good storytelling, which you are an expert
Storytelling
at.
and story. And that too, I didn't realize I was that until about 2 years ago.
Isn't that fun that once we actually recover our ability to recognize ourselves and remember who we truly are, there can be so many wonderful surprises. Like you, I did not consider myself a creative person because I had a very limited view of creativity. I
Yep.
thought creativity meant artists.
Yes.
I am an
Yes.
incredibly creative person. I work with mostly creative people, but I did not consider that to apply to me because I wasn't making art.
You are going to love our upcoming panel. It's going to be about connecting art with courage.
I'm there for it.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, so let's keep going. So we talked about this truth stuff. Um, Now I want to know, What blows your mind and rocks your world?
I
Lay
like
it down, sister.
I like surprising myself, and I like doing things that the younger Diane would be too afraid to do.
Yeah.
I'm not totally dense, and it's not like I don't give a shit about what anyone thinks of me. Of course I do. Of course I do. But I find that being more honest and more vulnerable in equal measure is not only kind of blowing my mind and rocking my world, but it's allowing me to do that for other people. Sometimes it's something that I do physical, like for my 60th birthday, I went
Mhm,
skydiving with my kids. And not only the skydiving, because many people do that for milestone birthdays, but
mhm,
I approached it in a very specific way. I use the techniques that I have learned from Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness, and also some coaching techniques that I've learned on how to deal with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So, for weeks before the jump, I was practicing these techniques because my goal was to desensitize myself to fear so that I would experience only joy and exhilaration on the jump. My husband, on the other hand, was so terrified. He has a fear of heights. He wasn't even there for the jump because I knew if I was around his fear that it would affect me. So I sent him
mhm,
home, and it was months before he would look at the photographs or the
mhm,
videos. But eventually he said, "You know what? You did it, Di. You really did it." Like I was smiling and laughing the whole time. What that proved to me is, yeah, of course, that kind of blew my mind. I didn't know that I was capable of overcoming a very natural built-in instinct to be afraid of jumping out of an airplane at 13,000 feet. But it when I got to the ground and all the dopamine and all that was just so exciting. Once my body started coming back to normal, you know what thought popped into my mind? I wonder what else I can do. It was
mhm,
just right there. And so I kind of let that guide me because, like many women our age, I have missed out on far too many opportunities and I have failed to push myself forward when things were available to me. I talked myself out of too many things. It wasn't just that I was denied opportunities, which I was because of my gender, but I also participated in that. I talked myself out of things. I
mhm.
told myself, I can't do this. I don't have what it takes. I won't be good at this. I won't see it through. I'll suck. And now I'm trying to reverse that trend. So by the end of my life, however many years from now it'll be, I will not be burdened by regret. That's the thing I want to avoid most of all.
Yeah. Yep. Regret is not something I want in my life either.
It's a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
And I think there's a book about this. I can never quite remember the name, but there's a book where someone interviewed a bunch of people at the very, very end of their life. And the synopsis of the book is that people don't regret the dumb things they did, the money they wasted, the mistakes they made. What they regret almost universally is the risks they didn't take because they were afraid. And it's like, do we really have to be on our deathbed to understand that? I want to work with that now and think, okay, how am I holding back?
Yeah.
What am I resisting? What am I avoiding? And maybe I don't have to keep jumping out of airplanes. But what else don't I know that I can do because I haven't been willing to try? And that's been a
Exactly.
big driver for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And facing it, you know? Because I think if you come across these situations and, having your own business, being an entrepreneur, having to make these decisions day to day, what do I do today? Because, what you wake up with planning and, with what your day is going to be like in the morning could be totally different in the afternoon. And, that takes some guts to be able to do that on a regular basis and not have all the answers and still make the decisions. And, but if we can little by little do that, decision by decision, we chip away at that where regret isn't even an option. It's not on the table.
I think if I were to say there's one thing for women over 50 that will absolutely help you blow your own mind and rock
Mhm.
your world and really make you a more powerful person is changing your relationship with failure.
Yeah.
This took me way too long to learn, but most women I know, for as long as they have been alive, have thought when I make a mistake, that means I'm a loser.
Mhm.
So they do everything humanly possible to avoid failure. Well, the only way to completely avoid failure is to stay firmly in your comfort zone, take no risks, and
Mhm.
just hunker down right where you are, which to me is like a slow death.
Yeah.
So if we could change the way we think about mistakes and failure, so it's just part of the learning curve, that would literally change everything.
Mhm. And it is the learning curve because, what you learn through experiences, good and bad, is what
Still
makes
learning.
you who you are. And
Yeah.
that's what the opportunities are. The opportunities are in the intersections. And the intersections are sometimes positive and sometimes they're not so positive. And it's just all part of it. It can't be sunshine and roses every day.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have to slog through what was it in Candyland? The muddy chocolate valley.
Actually, it's funny that you're thinking of a kid's board game because I sometimes use the analogy that because I was a child therapist a long time ago, um, playing shoots and ladders. You know, we might land on the ladder and shoot all the way to the top of the game,
Mhm,
but we take it so much harder when we fall in the chute and we slide all the way back to the bottom. Like, what if we could just approach life like a kid's board game? Sometimes you shoot up the ladder and sometimes you go down the chute, and it's
mhm.
all part of the game.
It is all part of it, and, sometimes, it's a gift when you go down that slide because what you find the next go around is better than what you had before.
And to quote a friend of mine, Jessica Lackey, sometimes your ladder, the ladder you're working so hard to climb, is actually against the wrong wall. So
Oh,
some isn't that good? So
yeah,
sometimes it's actually a good thing when you're kind of forced to start over because you get the opportunity to reevaluate, why was I even doing that to begin with?
yeah. Okay, so we're just at, 30 minutes. I like to end these with, um, asking if you can just leave one wisdom bomb that you want everybody to know, what would that be?
Other people's opinions of you are not nearly as important as your opinion of yourself. If you don't like the person you've allowed yourself to become, you can change it. You don't have to ask for anyone's permission. You can give it to yourself.
Yeah,
Change. It's under your control. It really is.
that's brilliant. It really is, and we don't learn that. People don't teach us that.
No. Nope. I think our school system needs to be completely revamped so
Or it will be.
children understand and parents understand we don't need to shape our children who we think they should be. They already know who they are. We need to stay out of their way.
Yep. Yeah, as I was parenting, one of the big, guiding forces of the way that I parented was that he was only on loan to me.
Mm,
I was there to shepherd the early years, but he was just on loan. It wasn't up to me to decide who he is.
mm.
And I always told him, "Your opinion matters." Before he could even talk, I would ask him, "What do you think of this? And what do you think of that? And what do you think of this?" And it could be anything. It could be, "Do you want blue or green? Do you want applesauce or ketchup?" Or whatever. It didn't matter. I would always make sure that he knew he had an opinion, and I would listen to it, no matter how ridiculous it might be.
What a fortunate boy he is.
He'll realize that soon.
Mm. No, that's wonderful because I don't think too many parents in our generation parented that way. We were too busy worrying about what impression that child was creating in the world as a reflection of us.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, you understood he's his own person,
And
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 your
he
job is to help him be that.
yeah, yeah.
Mm, love it.
Yeah. Okay. So, if you're listening on the replay, please tag us if you have any questions, anything to add to the conversation. But I love to keep these conversations going. We have people that come and binge the episodes. So, it doesn't end with this interview. And we have interviews booked all the way into November. And we're filming this in January, and we have monthly wisdom panels that we'll be doing every month. And January's is going to be on courage on the 16th. So come back for that and connect with Diann. Her website is diannwingertcoaching.com, and all of the information is all over the place. I've been sharing this like crazy.
Love it. Thank you,
But
Donna.
thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom and your stories. I really appreciate it. And we will be back next week.